I handed my daughter the keys to a dream life, and she turned it into a nightmare. I came back early from a business trip to find my son-in-law, a man battling stage 4 cancer, left to rot in his own bed. Meanwhile, my daughter was 2 towns over, bar hopping with a car full of college boys in the convertible I paid for. I didn't scream. I didn't make a scene. I simply picked up my phone, canceled her credit cards, and reported the car stolen. When she finally came crawling back, she realized the Bank of Mom was closed forever. This is where the story truly begins. Before we dive in, what time is it where you are? Which country are you watching from? Leave a comment and let me know. And please hit that like button and subscribe to become part of Mama Joyce's Chronicles community for more inspiring stories. The flight back from London was grueling. 8 hours of cramped legs and dry air, but my heart was racing faster than the plane. I usually stick to a strict schedule. I didn't build a real estate empire by being spontaneous, but something felt off. Call it a mother's intuition or just a gut feeling, but a cold knot had formed in my stomach 3 days ago and refused to loosen. My son-in-law, Liam, had been fighting a losing battle with lymphoma for a year. He was the son I never had, a gentle giant who treated my daughter, Chloe, like she was spun gold. Chloe, on the other hand, had always been difficult. Beautiful, yes, with my sharp eyes and a smile that could charm a snake out of a basket, but she had a streak of selfishness that terrified me. I thought marriage had fixed her. I thought seeing her husband sick would ground her. Lord, I was naive. I took a cab straight from the airport to their house. Well, my house, technically. I bought the sprawling 4-bedroom colonial in the suburbs 2 years ago so they wouldn't have to worry about rent while Liam was in treatment. It sat on a manicured lawn, looking like the picture of the American dream. But as I stepped out of the taxi, the silence of the neighborhood felt heavy, almost suffocating. The driveway was empty. That was the first red flag. Chloe's car, a cherry red Mercedes convertible I'd gifted her for her 28th birthday, was gone. It was 2 p.m. on a Tuesday. She was supposed to be working from home, supposed to be taking care of Liam. I used my spare key to open the front door. I expected the smell of lemon polish or maybe the chicken soup I taught her to make. Instead, the air inside was thick and stale. It smelled like unwashed laundry, old takeout, and that distinct, sharp scent of rubbing alcohol mixed with something sour. "Chloe?" I called out. My voice echoed in the hallway. No answer. I dropped my luggage by the door and walked into the living room. It was a disaster zone. Pizza boxes were stacked on the coffee table, wine glasses with dried red stains were scattered on the floor, and throw pillows were tossed everywhere like a frat party had just wrapped up. My heart hammered against my ribs. This wasn't just messy, this was neglect. I took the stairs 2 at a time, my 60-year-old knees protesting with every step, but panic pushed me forward. I pushed open the door to the master bedroom. The room was dim, the curtains drawn tight against the afternoon sun. The smell here was worse, sickness and sweat. "Liam," I whispered. A weak groan came from the bed. I rushed over and flipped the bedside lamp on. What I saw nearly brought me to my knees. Liam was pale, his skin gray and clammy, looking like a skeleton wrapped in skin. His lips were cracked and dry, covered with white flakes. On the nightstand, his pain medication bottles were knocked over, empty. A glass of water sat just out of his reach, the water warm and dusty. "Joyce?" he croaked, his voice sounding like grinding gravel. He tried to lift his head but didn't have the strength. Is that you?" "I'm here, baby. I'm here," I said, fighting back the tears stinging my eyes. I grabbed the glass, filled it with fresh water from the bathroom tap, and held a straw to his lips. He drank like a man who had been lost in the desert for days. "Where is she, Liam?" I asked, my voice trembling with a mix of sorrow and rising fury. "Where is Chloe?" He closed his eyes, a single tear leaking out. She said she needed a break, said the smell of the medicine was making her sick. She left, I think 2 days ago. I haven't eaten since Sunday." 2 days! My daughter left her dying husband alone for 2 days, without food, without help, unable to even reach his water glass? I was about to call 911 when my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a notification from Instagram. Chloe had posted a story. My hands shook when I opened the app. There she was, my daughter. She wasn't sick, and she wasn't taking a mental health break at a spa. The video showed her hair whipping in the wind, driving down the coastal highway in the red Mercedes. The music was blasting, some trashy pop song about living forever. In the passenger seat and in the back seat were 3 young guys, barely old enough to shave, holding red Solo cups and cheering. The caption read, "Finally free from the gloom. Hot girl summer starts now. #YOLO." I stared at the screen, and something inside me snapped. It wasn't just anger, it was the death of the blind love I had held for her for 28 years. I looked down at Liam, who had drifted back into a feverish sleep, and then back at the phone where my daughter was laughing without a care in the world. I stood up, wiped my face, and dialed a number. Not the police yet. I dialed my personal banker. "Hello, David? Everything okay?" "No, David," I said, my voice dead calm. "I need you to freeze everything. The supplementary cards, the joint account, the emergency fund, all of it. Cut the cord now." "Joyce, that will leave Chloe with 0 access. She's in another city, isn't she?" "I know exactly where she is, and she's about to find out that the ride is over." But freezing the money was just the warm-up. I needed to get her off the road before she killed someone or herself. I walked out of the bedroom and dialed 911. "911, what is your emergency?" "Yes," I said, walking past the pile of rotting garbage in my living room. "I'd like to report a grand theft auto, a red Mercedes convertible. I know exactly who took it, and I know exactly where they are headed." The dispatcher asked for the details. I gave them with surgical precision. As I hung up, I looked at the family portrait hanging in the hallway. Me, Liam, and Chloe smiling on their wedding day. I took it off the wall and dropped it into the trash can. I was just getting started, but as I turned to go back to Liam, I heard the front door handle jaggle downstairs. Someone was trying to get in, and they were struggling with the lock. I froze. Chloe wouldn't be back this soon. I moved silently to the top of the stairs and looked down. Through the frosted glass, I could see 2 shadows, and then I heard a voice that made my blood run cold. A voice that wasn't Chloe's, but someone I recognized from a very different, very dark part of my past.
I didn't wait for them to break in. I wasn't the type of woman to hide in a closet. I grabbed a heavy brass umbrella stand from the hallway, a relic from my days staging luxury homes, and yanked the front door open. "Can I help you?" I barked, swinging the door wide. Standing there were 2 men who looked like they'd been chewed up and spit out by the city. One was skinny with nervous eyes, the other was built like a vending machine, but it was the skinny one I recognized, Marco. He was a low-level hustler I had banned from my properties 10 years ago for pushing pills on teenagers. Marco's eyes went wide. He clearly expected Chloe, not her angry mother wielding a blunt object. "Miss Joyce? We were just looking for Chloe. She ain't answering her phone." "Chloe isn't here," I said, my voice sharp enough to cut glass, "and seeing as she's married and this is my house, neither are you. What do you want, Marco?" The big guy stepped forward, cracking his knuckles. She owes us, lady, $5,000, said she'd have it today, said her husband kicked the bucket and she was getting the insurance payout. The world stopped spinning for a second. My knees almost buckled. Kicked the bucket? My daughter was betting on her husband's death? She was borrowing money against his life insurance policy while he was still breathing upstairs? The rage that filled me wasn't hot, it was absolute zero. It was the kind of cold that burns. "Listen to me very carefully," I said, stepping onto the porch, right into the big guy's personal space. "The police are already on their way here for a different matter. You have exactly 30 seconds to get off my lawn before I add attempted burglary and extortion to their list. And trust me, with my lawyers, you won't see daylight until you're my age." Marco looked at the heavy brass object in my hand, then at the distant sound of sirens approaching. The ambulance I had mentally prayed for, but he didn't know that. "Let's go, T," Marco muttered, grabbing the big guy's arm. "She ain't bluffing. That's the dragon lady." They scrambled into a beat-up sedan and peeled out of the driveway just as the ambulance turned the corner, lights flashing. I didn't have time to process the horror of what Marco said. I had to save Liam. The paramedics were efficient. They loaded Liam onto the stretcher. He was barely conscious, mumbling about being cold. I rode in the back with him, holding his bony hand. It felt fragile, like a dried leaf. "His vitals are critical, ma'am," the paramedic said, working fast to get an IV line in. "Severe dehydration, possible kidney failure. Another 12 hours and—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. At the hospital, they rushed him into the ICU. I was left standing in the waiting room, the smell of antiseptic bringing back memories of my late husband's passing. I sat in a hard plastic chair, my designer bag heavy on my lap, feeling utterly alone. But I wasn't just a grieving mother-in-law. I was a general at war. I pulled out my phone. It was time to check on the enemy. I opened my banking app. The notifications were piling up like a car wreck. Transaction denied. Shell gas station, $65. Transaction denied. Liquors and spirits, $140. Transaction denied. The roadside motel, $89. She was trying to spend money she no longer had. Then my phone rang. The screen lit up with a picture of Chloe, a selfie where she looked innocent and sweet. I stared at it for a long moment. I could answer and scream at her. I could tell her Liam was dying. I could tell her about Marco. But silence is a weapon, too. I let it ring. Once, twice, 3 times. Then it went to voicemail. I could imagine her standing at that gas station counter, card in hand, the cute college boys watching her get rejected, the embarrassment, the confusion. She was probably trying to call the bank, but I had put a verbal passcode on the account that only I knew. Ungrateful. A doctor in scrubs approached me, looking grim. "Mrs. Joyce?" I stood up, smoothing my skirt. "Yes?" "We located the red Mercedes, but there's been a complication. You need to see this." He held out a tablet. On the screen was a live traffic camera feed. What I saw made my jaw drop, and I realized this nightmare was about to get a whole lot louder. I peered at the tablet screen, squinting against the harsh glare of the hospital lights. The footage was shaky, coming from a police cruiser's dash cam, but the image was unmistakable. My red Mercedes was pinned against the guardrail of the interstate, surrounded by 2 patrol cars. But the car wasn't the problem. The problem was the performance my daughter was putting on. Chloe was out of the vehicle, standing on the shoulder of the highway in her designer heels, phone held high. She was live streaming. Even through the grainy video, I could see her wild gestures. She was screaming at the officer, pointing the camera at his badge, playing the role of the oppressed victim to perfection. "She's refusing to comply," the officer next to me said, his voice flat.
She's telling my guys that this is a prank, that her mother, that's you, is a bit of a drama queen who forgot she borrowed the car. She's demanding we call you to clear this up." I watched as one of the college boys, the one with the backward baseball cap, tried to sneak away from the passenger side, only to be barked at by a cop to get back on the ground. "Officer," I said, turning my gaze away from the embarrassing spectacle, "let me be crystal clear. I did not give her that car. I filed a report because she took it without permission while fleeing the scene of domestic neglect." The officer nodded, tapping his pen on his notepad. "That's all we needed to hear. But there's more, Mrs. Miller. When she opened the glove box to look for registration, the responding officer spotted something. Several prescription bottles, high-grade painkillers. The names on the bottles didn't match hers." My stomach dropped to the floor. "Let me guess. They said Liam Davis?" "They did," the officer confirmed. "And we found a wad of cash in the center console. Looks like she's been selling them. That upgrades this from a joyride to possession with intent to distribute, plus the theft." I closed my eyes. It wasn't enough that she left him to die. She was selling his relief to pay for her party. She was stripping him for parts while he was still breathing. "Do what you have to do," I whispered. "Book her. We're authorized to arrest?" "Every charge you can make stick," I said, my voice hardening into steel. "Don't let her charm you. Don't let her cry her way out of it. She is not a child. She is a predator." The officer radioed it in. On the tablet screen, I watched the reality hit Chloe. An officer stepped forward, spun her around, and slapped the cuffs on. The phone flew out of her hand, landing on the asphalt. I saw her mouth open in a scream I couldn't hear, her face twisting from arrogance to shock. They guided her into the back of the cruiser like a common criminal. The ride was over. I handed the tablet back. "Thank you. We'll need a formal statement later," the officer said, tipping his cap before leaving. I walked back to the ICU room, my legs feeling like lead. Inside, the only sound was the rhythmic whoosh, beep of the ventilator. Liam was stable, but barely. He looked so small in that big bed, hooked up to tubes that were doing the work his body couldn't. I pulled a chair up to his bedside and took his hand again. "I got her, Liam," I whispered to his sleeping face. "She can't hurt you anymore. I promise." I sat there for 2 hours, watching the sun go down over the city skyline, thinking about where I went wrong. Did I spoil her too much? Did I shield her from consequences so often that she thought she was a god? Or was she just born broken? My introspection was interrupted by the buzzing of my phone. I pulled it out, expecting a call from my lawyer or maybe the bank. The screen read, "Unknown caller, County Correctional Facility." It was her, the one phone call. I stared at the green button. Part of me wanted to throw the phone out the window. Part of me wanted to hear her beg. But the new Joyce, the one who had just sent her only child to jail, knew that information was power. I slid my finger across the screen. "Hello?" "Mom!" Chloe's voice was high-pitched, frantic, and echoing off concrete walls. "Oh my God, finally! You have to come down here. These people are insane. They actually arrested me. Tell them it was a mistake. Tell them you gave me the car." She didn't ask about Liam. She didn't ask how I was. Just orders. "I can't do that, Chloe," I said calmly. "What do you mean you can't?" Her voice dropped an octave, turning into a growl. "Stop playing games. It's freezing in here and it smells like bleach. Bring the lawyer and get me out now." "You're where you belong," I said. "You stole my car, you stole your dying husband's medication, and you left him to rot." There was a silence on the other end, a long, heavy silence. I thought maybe, just maybe, shame had finally found her. Then she laughed. It was a cold, dry sound that made the hair on my arm stand up. "Oh, is that what this is about? Saint Liam?" she scoffed. Mom, wake up. He's a dead man walking. I was just cashing out before he checks out. Why should I be miserable just because he is? And by the way, don't get too comfortable on your high horse. Excuse me? You think you've won because I'm in a cell. She dropped her voice to a sinister whisper. You forget whose name is on the deed to the house alongside yours. You forget what I found in Dad's old office before I left. If you don't get me out of here by morning, I'm going to burn your entire legacy to the ground. The line went dead. I pulled the phone away from my ear, staring at it in disbelief. She wasn't asking for forgiveness, she was declaring war. And she mentioned Dad's old office, my late husband's private study, a room I hadn't opened in 5 years. What did she find? I stood up, grabbed my coat, and looked at Liam one last time. I had to go back to the house. I had to find out what leverage she thought she had before she used it to destroy us both. But as I rushed to the elevator, I bumped into a nurse running towards Liam's room with a crash cart. "Code blue," she yelled. "Room 304, code blue." I froze. Room 304. That was Liam.
"Clear!" a voice shouted, followed by the sickening thump of paddles hitting a chest. I watched from the hallway, pressed against the glass as my dying son-in-law's body convulsed on the bed. The heart monitor was a flat, angry line. That high-pitched whine, was the sound of my world collapsing. They were losing him, not because of the cancer, but because his body was too weak to fight the withdrawal from the medicine my daughter had stolen to sell for party cash. "Charge to 200! Clear!" Thump. A second passed. Then 2. Then a miracle. Beep, beep, beep. The rhythm returned, shaky and weak, but there. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding and slid down the wall until I hit the floor. This is where the story truly begins. Before we dive in, what time is it where you are? Which country are you watching from? Leave a comment and let me know, and please hit that like button and subscribe to become part of Mama Joyce's Chronicles community for more inspiring stories. A doctor stepped out, sweating and looking grim. "Mrs. Miller, we got him back, but his heart is under immense strain. The sudden cessation of his pain management caused a shock to his system. If he hadn't been here when it happened, he wouldn't have made it." "He's alive," I said, standing up, my legs trembling but my resolve turning into granite. "That's all that matters. Keep him safe. I have to go deal with the person who pulled the trigger." I left the hospital. I didn't go to the jail. I went back to the house. Chloe's threat about Dad's office was eating at me. My late husband, Richard, was a meticulous man, but he had secrets like anyone else. If Chloe had found something she thought could destroy me, I needed to know what it was before her lawyer used it. I walked into the house, the silence now feeling sinister. I went straight to the heavy oak door at the end of the hall, Richard's study. I hadn't stepped foot in there since the funeral. It was a shrine to a better time. But when I opened the door, the shrine had been desecrated. Drawers were pulled out and dumped on the floor. Books were swept off the shelves. The velvet painting of the two of us was crooked. Chloe had tossed this room looking for leverage. I walked over to the large wall safe hidden behind the wet bar. Richard had taught me the combination, but he told me only to open it in an emergency. The painting covering it was swung wide open. The safe door was ajar. My stomach dropped. "No," I whispered. I peered inside. The cash reserve, about $10,000 kept for emergencies, was gone. That explained how she funded her road trip, but the documents, the thick leather binder that held the deeds, the business and corporation papers, and the original will was missing. So that was her game. She stole the deeds. She probably thought holding the physical paper meant she owned the property. It was a childish amateur understanding of the law, but dangerous in the hands of a desperate addict. I began sifting through the mess on the floor, looking for clues.
Under the desk, I found a crumpled piece of paper. I smoothed it out. It was a sheet of legal stationery. On it, over and over again, someone had practiced a signature. Joyce Miller. Joyce Miller. Joyce Miller. The handwriting started out shaky, clearly Chloe's loop-heavy script, but by the bottom of the page, it was terrifyingly identical to my own. And next to it was a sticky note in Marco's handwriting. Once you get the signature right on the transfer form, the house is ours. We kick the dying husband to the curb, sell the place, and split the $500K. I froze. This wasn't just theft. This was conspiracy. She wasn't just planning to wait for Liam to die. She was planning to evict him. She was going to forge my signature to transfer the deed to herself, sell the house out under us, and run off with the cash. She didn't find dirt on me. She was manufacturing it. She was going to claim I signed the house over to her. I took a picture of the practice sheet with my phone. This was the nail in her coffin. Attempted fraud, forgery, conspiracy. I felt a dark sense of satisfaction. She thought she had an ace up her sleeve, but she had just handed me the murder weapon. I turned to leave, ready to drive this evidence straight to the police station, when my phone pinged with a security alert. It wasn't from the house, it was from my commercial warehouse downtown, the headquarters of my logistics company. Alert! Main gate accessed. User Joyce Miller, spare key. I stared at the screen. I had my key in my purse. There was only one spare key in existence. I kept it in the safe. I looked back at the open safe. The hook where the spare key hung was empty. Chloe was in jail. She couldn't be at the warehouse. Realization hit me like a physical blow. She didn't work alone. She had given the key to someone else, someone who wasn't in handcuffs, someone who was currently opening the doors to my livelihood while I was distracted with the house. Marco. I didn't panic. Panic is a luxury for people who haven't built a company from the ground up in a male-dominated industry. When the alarm triggered, I didn't see a break-in. I saw a hostile takeover attempt by my own flesh and blood. I grabbed my car keys, not the keys to the sedan, but to my heavy-duty Land Rover, and walked out the door. This is where the story truly begins. Before we dive in, what time is it where you are? Which country are you watching from? Leave a comment and let me know. And please hit that like button and subscribe to become part of Mama Joyce's Chronicles community for more inspiring stories. I dialed 911 from the car, my voice steady as I merged onto the highway. This is Joyce Miller. I have an active break-in at Miller Logistics on 4th Avenue. Perpetrators are on site. I am en route. Ma'am, do not approach the suspects, the dispatcher warned. Police are dispatched. ETA 10 minutes. 10 minutes is too long, I muttered, hanging up. I drove fast, the streetlights blurring into streaks of orange and white. My mind was racing, connecting the dots. Chloe knew the warehouse schedule. She knew the night shift security guard, old Mr. Henderson, took his lunch break at 3 a.m. She had timed this perfectly. She wasn't just a party girl, she was a traitor. I pulled into the industrial district, cutting the headlights as I approached my facility. The warehouse loomed against the night sky, a massive steel beast that held my life's work. The main gate was standing wide open, the chain cut. And there it was. Marco's beat-up sedan was parked right by the loading dock. The trunk was popped open. I rolled the Land Rover forward, the tires crunching softly on the gravel, until I was blocking the exit. I locked my doors and pulled up the security app on my phone. My heart was hammering, but my hands were steady. Through the app, I accessed the interior cameras. The feed loaded, grainy and green-tinted. I saw them. Marco and the big guy, T. They weren't stealing electronics. They weren't stealing shipment crates. They were splashing liquid from red jerry cans onto the pallets of inventory. Gasoline. The air in my car suddenly felt too thin. They weren't here to rob me. They were here to burn it down. Chloe knew the insurance policy payout was in the millions. She figured if she couldn't get the cash from the bank, she'd burn my legacy to ash and collect the check later. "You evil little witch," I hissed. On the screen, Marco pulled out a lighter. I didn't wait for the police. I tapped the icon labeled Emergency Lockdown. Instantly, massive steel shutters slammed down over the loading bay doors and windows with a deafening clang. The sudden noise made Marco jump, dropping the lighter. It skittered across the concrete floor, unlit. I grabbed the microphone for the PA system, which I could access from my phone. "Good evening, gentlemen." My voice boomed through the warehouse speakers, amplified and echoing like the voice of God. On the camera feed, Marco spun around, looking up at the ceiling, terror written all over his face. "You are currently trespassing on private property. The exits are sealed, the ventilation is shut off, and the police are about 2 minutes away. If I were you, I'd step away from the gasoline before you accidentally turn yourselves into a barbecue." "Open the door!" Marco screamed at the camera, banging on the steel shutter. "Let us out! It was just a job. We didn't light it." "Who hired you, Marco?" I asked, though I already knew. "It was your girl!" he shrieked, pressing his face against the glass of the office window inside. "Chloe! She said you were cutting her off. She said if we torched the inventory, she'd give us 10% of the insurance claim. Just let us go!" Sirens wailed in the distance, getting louder by the second. Blue and red lights began to bounce off the warehouse walls. I watched from my car as the patrol unit swarmed the lot. Officers with drawn weapons approached the side door. I remotely raised the shutter just enough for them to slide under. Minutes later, they dragged Marco and T out in handcuffs. They smelled like a gas station. Marco was weeping, snot running down his face, looking nothing like the tough guy who had threatened me on my porch. I stepped out of my Land Rover, wrapping my coat tighter around me against the night chill. "Mrs. Miller?" A sergeant approached me. "We caught them red-handed. Attempted arson, breaking and entering, conspiracy. They're singing like canaries. They gave up your daughter as the mastermind." "Good," I said, feeling a wave of exhaustion hit me. "Add it to her file." "We will," the sergeant said, "but you need to see this. We found it in the suspect's pocket." He handed me an evidence bag. Inside was a set of keys. Not the warehouse keys. These were small brass keys with a bank logo stamped on them. My blood ran cold. "He says your daughter gave these to him before she got arrested," the sergeant said quietly. "She told him if the fire didn't work, to go to the First National Bank tomorrow morning. She gave him the authorization code." I stared at the keys. They were for my safety deposit box, the one that didn't hold money. It held the family heirlooms, my grandmother's diamonds, the vintage watches, the tangible history of our family that was supposed to be passed down to grandchildren. Chloe had given away the keys to our history to a drug dealer as a backup plan. "Take him away," I whispered, turning my back on the pathetic sight of Marco being shoved into a cruiser. I got back into my car. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by a deep, aching sadness. I had saved the business. I had saved the house. I had saved the heirlooms. But as I put the car in drive, my phone rang. It was my lawyer, Evelyn. It was 4 a.m. Lawyers don't call at 4 a.m. unless the world is ending. "Evelyn?" I answered. "I know, it's been a night. I just stopped an arson attempt." "Joyce, listen to me." Evelyn's voice was urgent, breathless. "You need to leave the warehouse. You need to go to a hotel. Don't go home." "What? Why? Chloe is in jail. Marco is in handcuffs." "No, Joyce," and her next words stopped my heart. "I just got a notification from the court clerk. Chloe made bail 20 minutes ago. She's out." "That's impossible," I stammered. "I froze her assets. She has no money. Who paid her bond?" That's the problem, Joyce, Evelyn said. It wasn't a bondsman. It was a private party. Someone paid cash, a lot of cash. And Joyce, the person who signed for her release, it's someone we haven't seen in 30 years.
Elias, Evelyn whispered over the phone, the name landing like a curse. It was Elias Thorne, Richard's estranged brother. I nearly swerved off the road. The phone slipped in my sweaty palm. Elias, the black sheep of the family, the man my late husband had erased from our lives 30 years ago after he embezzled half our startup capital to pay off gambling debts to the mob. Richard had sworn on his deathbed that Elias would never touch a cent of our fortune. And now my daughter had opened the gates of hell and invited him back in. This is where the story truly begins. Before we dive in, what time is it where you are? Which country are you watching from? Leave a comment and let me know. And please, hit that like button and subscribe to become part of Mama Joyce's Chronicles community for more inspiring stories. He paid $50,000 in cash, Joyce, Evelyn continued, her voice trembling. If he's back and if Chloe is with him, they aren't just coming for the house, they're coming for the empire. I know, I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Chloe found his file in Richard's study. She thinks she found a rich uncle who will save her. She has no idea she just handcuffed herself to a shark. Go to a hotel, Joyce, please. Elias is dangerous. No, I said, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. If Elias is involved, he doesn't care about Chloe. He cares about the assets. And the easiest asset to liquidate right now isn't the warehouse. It's the life insurance policy attached to a dying man. You don't mean... I'm going to the hospital, I interrupted. Meet me there with security, now. I hung up and floored the accelerator. The Land Rover roared, tearing down the empty city streets. My mind flashed back to the dad's office threat. Chloe hadn't just been looking for money, she had been looking for a weapon, and she found the one man who hated me as much as she did. I reached the hospital in record time, abandoning my car in the physicians-only lot. I didn't run, I marched. I was a woman possessed. The ICU waiting room was quiet, usually a place of hushed prayers and silent tears, but as I rounded the corner, I heard voices, loud, arrogant voices that didn't belong in a place of healing. Look, sweetie, it's simple math, a man's voice drawled, smooth like oil. He's a vegetable. We transfer him to the state facility, save the premium costs, and redirect the funds to your legal defense. But Mom will flip, Chloe whined. Mom isn't the power of attorney anymore, is she? Not if we prove she's mentally unstable. I stepped into the room. There they were. Chloe, looking fresh and smug in a new outfit that I'm sure Elias bought her, and sitting across from her, looking older but just as snake-like as I remembered, was Elias. He was wearing a suit that cost more than my car, his silver hair slicked back, a predator's grin plastered on his face. He spotted me first. "Joyce!" he boomed, standing up and spreading his arms wide, as if we were long-lost friends. "You look ravishing. Grief suits you." "Get away from her," I spat, stopping 10 feet away, "and get the hell out of my hospital." Chloe stood up, crossing her arms. She looked different, harder. "It's a public place, Mom, and Uncle Elias is just helping me navigate this mess you created." "He's using you, you stupid girl," I said, keeping my eyes on Elias. "He doesn't love you. He wants the company. He wants the trust fund." Elias chuckled, dusting off his lapel. Now, Joyce, that's a harsh accusation. I'm just a concerned uncle helping his favorite niece. Speaking of which, we were just discussing poor Liam. It seems wasteful to keep him in such an expensive private room. I've already drawn up the paperwork to have him moved." He held up a clipboard.
You have no standing, I said, stepping forward. Actually, Elias smiled, revealing teeth that looked too white, too sharp. Chloe is his wife, next of kin. She decides where he stays, and she thinks, and I agree, that a state hospice is more appropriate. He will die if you move him, I shouted, the veneer of calm cracking. People die, Joyce, Elias shrugged. It's the circle of life. But money is immortal. If you want him to stay here, well, we might be open to a trade. A trade? I said, fury. Drop the charges against Chloe, sign over 51% of Miller Logistics to me, and we leave the boy alone. I looked at Chloe. She wasn't even looking at me. She was checking her nails, bored. She was willing to barter her husband's life for her freedom. I looked back at Elias. He thought he had me cornered. He thought I was just a grandmother with a checkbook. He forgot that I was the one who cleaned up Richard's messes for 40 years. I have a counteroffer, I said, reaching into my purse. Elias raised an eyebrow. Oh, a checkbook. No, I said, pulling out my phone. A live stream. I turned the screen around. It was recording. Say that again, Elias, I said, my voice steady. Repeat your extortion attempt to the 2,000 people currently watching on my company's Facebook page. Go ahead. Tell the world how you're ransoming a cancer patient. Elias's smile vanished. He lunged for the phone. Turn that off! Don't touch me, I yelled, stepping back. Suddenly, the ICU doors burst open behind me. Security guards poured in, led by Evelyn. Mr. Thorne, Evelyn announced, her voice ringing with authority. You are violating a 30-year-old restraining order that was never rescinded, and you are harassing a witness in an active criminal investigation. Elias froze. He looked at the guards, then at the phone, then at me. He realized he had overplayed his hand. He sneered, straightening his jacket. This isn't over, Joyce, he hissed, leaning in close. You think you're clever? You think you've won? Go check your house. Go check the master bedroom. My blood ran cold. Come on, Chloe, Elias barked. Chloe looked confused. Wait, we're leaving? But you said, shut up and walk. Elias grabbed her arm roughly, dragging her toward the exit. She yelped, stumbling in her heels, looking back at me with wide, scared eyes. But I didn't move to help her. She chose her team. As the security guards escorted them out, Elias's parting words echoed in my head. Go check the master bedroom. I turned to Evelyn. Stay with Liam. Put a guard at his door. No one enters unless I say so. Where are you going? Evelyn asked, grabbing my arm. Joyce, don't play his game. He did something, I said, pulling away. He wasn't at the hospital the whole time. He was at the house. I ran back to my car. The drive home was a blur of terror. What could he have done? The police had already been there. The locks were... The locks. I hadn't changed the locks yet. I pulled into my driveway. The front door was open. I ran inside, ignoring the mess in the living room, and sprinted up the stairs to the master bedroom. I skidded to a halt in the doorway. The room was empty, but on the bed, my bed, sat a single red envelope, and pinned to the wall above the headbed was carved into the expensive silk wallpaper with a knife that stopped my heart. It wasn't just money we took. I grabbed the red envelope and tore it open. Inside was a Polaroid, a picture of Liam. But not Liam in the hospital. It was a picture of Liam from before, a picture that shouldn't exist. And written on the back of the photo, in Chloe's handwriting, was a secret so devastating it threatened to destroy not just my future, but my entire past.
I stared at the back of the Polaroid, my hands trembling so violently I nearly dropped it. The photo showed a bottle of pills, unmarked, ominous, sitting on my bedside table. The handwriting on the back was jagged, hurried, but the message was clear as day. We know you're switching his meds. We know you're keeping him sick. The police are on their way to find the stash you hid in your room. Good luck explaining this, Mom. It was a setup, a frame-up so vile, so calculated, it could only be the work of Elias. They weren't just trying to steal the money, they were trying to paint me as a monster. They wanted to prove I was poisoning Liam so they could strip me of my rights, take custody of him, and then, God help him, let him die to cash out. This is where the story truly begins. Before we dive in, what time is it where you are? Which country are you watching from? Leave a comment and let me know. And please hit that like button and subscribe to become part of Mama Joyce's Chronicles community for more inspiring stories. I didn't have time to scream. I didn't have time to cry. Through the open front door, I heard the wail of sirens. Not one car, 3. They were coming in hot. Elias had timed this perfectly. He lured me to the hospital to create a scene, then sent me racing home just in time to be found at the scene of the crime. I sprinted into my bathroom. I tore open the medicine cabinet, checking behind the mirror, under the sink. Nothing. Then I checked the nightstand drawer, the one in the photo. There it was, a clear plastic bag filled with white powder and a half-empty bottle of arsenic-based rat poison. You dirty rotten, I hissed. I grabbed the bag. My instinct was to flush it, to destroy it, but then I froze. If I flushed it and they swabbed the pipes, it would look like destruction of evidence. If I held it, I was caught red-handed. Police! Search warrant! Open up! The bullhorn blared from the driveway. I was trapped. My own house had become a cage. I dropped the bag back into the drawer and wiped my fingerprints off the handle with my sleeve. I walked out onto the landing, hands raised, trying to summon the dignity of a CEO while my world burned down around me. The front door burst open. A tactical team swarmed the foyer, followed by 2 detectives in cheap suits. Behind them, looking fake concerned, was a social worker from Adult Protective Services. Joyce Miller, the lead detective barked, his hand resting on his holster. Step away from the stairs. I am Joyce Miller, I said, my voice steady, though my heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird, and I would love to know why you are breaking down the door of a grieving woman. We received a tip regarding the attempted homicide of a vulnerable adult, the lead detective said, climbing the stairs. We have probable cause to believe you have been chemically compromising your sons-in-law's recovery. That is a lie, I said, locking eyes with him. My daughter and her uncle planted evidence. They are trying to frame me. We'll see about that, he muttered. Check the bedroom. I watched, helpless, as an officer went straight to the nightstand. He didn't search the closet. He didn't check under the bed. He went straight to the drawer. Bingo, the officer called out, lifting the bag of white powder with a gloved hand. Looks like crushed antihistamines mixed with, yeah, that's rat poison. The social worker gasped. Oh my God, that poor man! The detective turned to me, his face hard. Joyce Miller, you are under arrest for the attempted homicide of Liam Davis and elder abuse. Turn around and place your hands behind your back. The cold steel of the handcuffs clicked around my wrists. It felt surreal. I was a pillar of the community. I donated to the police fund. I built libraries. And now I was being marched out of my own home past my neighbors who were watching from their driveways with mouths hanging open. But the worst part wasn't the cuffs. It was seeing the black sedan parked down the street. The window rolled down just an inch. I saw a puff of cigar smoke and the flash of silver hair. Elias. He was watching his handiwork. As they shoved me into the back of the cruiser, the detective leaned in. "Your daughter has been granted emergency temporary guardianship of Mr. Davis, effective immediately. She's on her way to the hospital now to oversee his care." Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through my shock. If Chloe got to the hospital while I was in a holding cell, Liam would die. She would pull the plug. She would claim it was what he wanted. She would kill him tonight. I sat in the back of the cop car, the hard plastic seat digging into my back. I closed my eyes and forced myself to breathe. In, out. In, out. They took my freedom, they took my reputation, they took my home, but they made one fatal mistake. They didn't take my memory. As the car pulled away, I remembered something, a conversation I had with Richard 30 years ago, the night he kicked Elias out. He had told me about a safety deposit box, not the one Chloe looted, but a different one, a doomsday box kept at a bank that didn't exist anymore, under a name that wasn't ours. "Officer," I said, opening my eyes. The fear was gone. In its place was the cold calculation of a woman with nothing left to lose. "I'm going to use my one phone call, and I suggest you drive fast, because once I make that call, this entire department is going to wish they had stayed in bed today." The officer ignored me, but he didn't see the smile forming on my face. I wasn't calling a lawyer. I was calling the only person in this city who hated Elias more than I did, and he was about to bring a hailstorm that would make my arrest look like a tea party.
The sound of a jail cell door slamming shut is a sound you never forget. It's the sound of your humanity being stripped away, replaced by a number and a cold metal bench. I sat there, surrounded by women who looked at my Chanel suit with a mix of envy and hunger. But I didn't flinch. I wasn't an inmate. I was a CEO on a business trip to hell, and I had one meeting left to take. This is where the story truly begins. Before we dive in, what time is it where you are? Which country are you watching from? Leave a comment and let me know. And please hit that like button and subscribe to become part of Mama Joyce's Chronicles community for more inspiring stories. "Miller, phone call!" the guard barked, banging his baton on the bars. I walked to the wall-mounted phone, shielding the keypad with my body. My hands were steady as I dialed a number I had memorized 30 years ago, but never dared to use. It was a number Richard made me swear only to call if the law failed us. It rang once. "Speak," a gravelly voice answered. No hello, no pleasantries. "It's Joyce," I said, my voice low. "The rat is back. He's in the house, and he's trying to finish what he started." There was a pause on the other end, heavy and dangerous. "Elias?" "Yes, Marcus, I'm in a cell. He framed me, and he's on his way to the hospital to kill Liam. I need you to open the box." "I'm already moving, Duchess. The cavalry is coming, and we're bringing the sledgehammer." The line went dead. Marcus wasn't a lawyer. He was Richard's old business partner, the man who went to prison for the embezzlement Elias committed because he refused to rat on family. He had spent 20 years in a cell, stewing in hatred for Elias, and he knew where the bodies were buried, literally and figuratively. Meanwhile, across town, the nightmare was unfolding exactly as I feared. At the hospital, Chloe was putting on the performance of a lifetime. She stood at the nurse's station, dabbing at dry eyes with a tissue, holding the emergency guardianship papers Elias had secured from a crooked judge. "Please," she whimpered to the head nurse. "My mother, she's sick. She was poisoning him.
I just want to take my husband home. I want his last moments to be peaceful, away from her madness." Evelyn, my lawyer, was standing in front of Liam's door like a guard dog, but she was losing ground. 2 police officers, different ones who didn't know me, were reviewing the court order. "Ma'am," the officer said to Evelyn, "this is a valid court order. You are obstructing a legal guardian. Step aside or we will arrest you." Evelyn looked at Chloe, her eyes blazing. "You know what you're doing, Chloe. You're signing his death warrant." "I'm signing his release papers," Chloe snapped, dropping the act for a split second. "Now move!" Evelyn was forced to step aside. Chloe pushed the door open and walked into the ICU. Elias waited in the hallway, checking his watch, a smug grin plastered on his face. Back at the precinct, I was counting the cracks in the ceiling tiles when the front doors blew open. I couldn't see it, but I heard it, the commotion, the shouting. "You can't go back there!" a desk sergeant yelled. "Try and stop me!" a deep voice boomed. Moments later, the detective who arrested me appeared at my cell door. He looked pale. Behind him stood a man who looked like a mountain carved out of granite, Marcus. He was older now, scarred, wearing a leather jacket that looked like it had seen war. In his hand, he held a tablet. "Mrs. Miller," the detective stammered, fumbling with his keys. We have a situation. It seems there was a mistake." "A mistake?" I raised an eyebrow, standing up slowly. "This gentleman," he pointed to Marcus, "provided us with cloud footage from a hidden security system in your master bedroom, a system we didn't know existed." "Richard was always paranoid," Marcus winked at me, a cold, hard glint in his eye. The detective unlocked the door. "The footage clearly shows Mr. Thorne and your daughter entering the room 40 minutes ago. It shows Mr. Thorne placing the bag in the drawer and carving the message on the wall. You are free to go. We are issuing an APB for Elias Thorne." "Forget the APB," I said, stepping out of the cell and straightening my jacket. "He's at the hospital, and he's about to commit murder." "I'll drive," Marcus said. We ran to his muscle car that roared like a beast. We tore through the city, breaking every speed limit, running red lights. My heart was in my throat. "Faster, Marcus," I urged, gripping the dashboard. "I'm doing 90, Duchess," he grunted. We screeched into the hospital entrance, the tires smoking. I didn't wait for the car to stop completely. I jumped out and ran. I ran past the reception, past the stunned visitors, my heels clicking like gunfire on the linoleum. I reached the ICU floor. The hallway was empty. The police officers were gone. Evelyn was gone. The door to room 304 was closed. The blinds were drawn. I threw the door open with enough force to crack the plaster behind it. "Get away from him!" I screamed, but the sight in front of me froze the blood in my veins. The room was silent. The machines, the heart monitor, the ventilator were dark. The screens were black. Silence. Deadly, absolute silence. Chloe was standing by the bed, her hand still resting on the power cord she had just yanked from a wall. She turned to look at me, her eyes wide, not with fear, but with a terrifying, vacant realization of what she had just done. "Mom," she whispered, her voice trembling, He stopped breathing." I looked at the bed. Liam was motionless. His chest wasn't rising. I was too late.
"You killed him!" I screamed, the sound tearing from my throat like a wounded animal. I didn't think. I lunged across the room and shoved Chloe so hard she flew back and hit the wall. I scrambled for the thick power cord lying on the floor. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely grip it, but I jammed it back into the socket. The machines flickered to life. The screens flashed red. No pulse. The alarm began to wail, a steady, piercing scream that signaled death. This is where the story truly begins. Before we dive in, what time is it where you are? Which country are you watching from? Leave a comment and let me know. And please hit that like button and subscribe to become part of Mama Joyce's Chronicles community for more inspiring stories. Help! Somebody help me! I yelled, pumping Liam's chest with my own hands. I could feel his ribs under my palms, fragile and still. Don't you dare die on me, Liam! Fight! Medical staff swarms the room instantly. A nurse physically pulled me away while a doctor took over compressions. Charge to 300. Clear. Thump. Nothing. Again. Clear. Thump. I stood pressed against the wall, Marcus's heavy hand on my shoulder keeping me upright. Chloe was huddled in the corner, sobbing, her makeup running down her face in black streaks. She looked like a terrified child, but I felt absolutely nothing for her. That part of my heart had flatlined along with Liam. Come on, the doctor muttered. And then a beep. Weak, irregular, but real. We have a rhythm, the doctor exhaled, wiping sweat from his forehead. It's thready, but he's back. Get him on full life support. Stabilize him. I slumped against Marcus, sobbing with relief. He wasn't gone. Not yet. He's okay? Chloe whimpered, standing up. See? I told you. I didn't mean to. The cord I tripped. It was an accident. Save it for the jury, a deep voice boomed from the hallway. The detective from the precinct stepped into the room, gun drawn. Behind him were 2 officers, but they weren't looking at Chloe. They were looking at the door, where Elias had been trying to quietly slip away during the chaos. But he didn't get far. Marcus had anticipated this. He had positioned himself right in the doorway. He grabbed Elias by the collar of his expensive suit and slammed him against the wall. "Going somewhere, rat?" Marcus growled. "Get your hands off me," Elias shouted, trying to shake him off. "I am a bystander. I have nothing to do with this." "Elias Thorne," the detective announced, snapping handcuffs onto his wrists. "You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, tampering with evidence, fraud, and breaking a restraining order." "You have no proof," Elias spat. "We have video of you planting the poison in Mrs. Miller's bedroom, and we have witness testimony from your hired goons at the warehouse. It's over." Then the detective turned to Chloe. She was trembling, looking back and forth between me and Elias. "Chloe Miller," the detective said, pulling out a second pair of cuffs. "You are under arrest for the attempted murder of Liam Davis. We just witnessed you unplugging his life support." "No, no!" Chloe screamed, backing away until she hit the window. "I didn't do it. Uncle Elias told me to. He said it was the only way to save the money. He said Liam was already gone." The room went dead silent. Chloe had just confessed. Elias's face twisted into a mask of pure venom. He looked at Chloe, not with sympathy, but with disgust. "Shut up, you stupid girl. I barely know you. You're a grown woman. If you killed your husband, that's on you." Chloe gasped. The betrayal hit her harder than the handcuffs. "But you said we were partners. You said you loved me." "I said I loved the money," Elias sneered as the officers dragged him out. "And you were the easiest way to get to it. You're just like your mother, weak." Chloe looked at me, eyes pleading, tears streaming down her face. Mom, please, tell them he manipulated me. I'm your daughter. You can't let them take me to prison." I looked at the woman that I birthed, raised, and loved. I looked at the hands that unplugged the machine. "My daughter died a long time ago," I said, my voice cold and hollow. "You're just the thief who took her place." "Mom!" she shrieked as they dragged her out into the hallway, her heels dragging on the floor, the same way she had been dragged to jail just hours before. The room quieted down. The only sound was the rhythmic beep, beep, beep of Liam's heart. He was safe. The poison was found, the villains were caught, and the truth was out. Marcus put a hand on my shoulder. "You did good, Duchess. You took out the trash." It's not over, Marcus, I said, wiping my eyes and straightening my jacket. Locking them up isn't enough. They wanted my empire? They wanted the money? I walked over to the window and looked down at the police cruisers flashing below. I'm going to make sure that by tomorrow morning, neither of them has a dime to buy a candy bar from the prison commissary. I need you to drive me to the office. I have one final document to sign. Marcus nodded. The will? No, I said, a dark smile forming on my lips. Something much worse. But first, I have to pay a visit to the jail. I want Chloe to see exactly what she threw away. I turned to leave, but then my phone buzzed. It was a notification from the bank. A massive transfer attempt had just been flagged. I frowned. Chloe and Elias were in cuffs. Who was moving the money? I opened the app and saw the authorization code. It wasn't Elias and it wasn't Chloe. It was a pre-scheduled transfer, one that Chloe had set up days ago, set to trigger the moment she was officially designated as Liam's guardian. Transfer status? Pending. Amount? $2 million. Destination? The Cayman Islands. She had set a fail-safe. Even from jail, she was trying to rob us blind. I had about 10 minutes to stop the transfer before it cleared and the money vanished forever. And the only way to stop it was a biometric scan from the account holder. But the account wasn't in my name. It was in Liam's, and Liam was in a coma. I looked at Marcus. We have a problem.
The progress bar on the banking app was a green line of doom, inching toward the right side of the screen. 90%, 91%, $2 million. Liam's entire settlement from a previous workplace injury, money meant for his future care, was seconds away from vanishing into an offshore account Chloe controlled. I held Liam's phone in my sweating palm. The screen flashed, biometric authentication required. This is where the story truly begins. Before we dive in, what time is it where you are? Which country are you watching from? Leave a comment and let me know. And please hit that like button and subscribe to become part of Mama Joyce's Chronicles community for more inspiring stories. Joyce, do it! Marcus barked, watching the screen over my shoulder. I grabbed Liam's limp hand. It felt heavy, lifeless. The phone required a thumbprint. I pressed his thumb onto the sensor. Error. Try again. My heart stopped. The progress bar hit 95%. Come on, Liam, I whispered, pressing his thumb down again, angling it slightly. Help me help you. 98%. 99%. The phone vibrated. A green check mark appeared. Transaction canceled. I exhaled a breath that felt like it had been stuck in my chest for a week. The money was safe. Chloe's golden parachute had just been cut. She was going to prison broke. 2 days later, I walked into the county jail visitation room. The air smelled of industrial cleaner and despair. I sat on the metal stool, smoothing my skirt, waiting for the door on the other side of the glass to open. When Chloe walked in, she looked like a ghost. Her designer clothes were gone, replaced by a shapeless orange jumpsuit. Her hair was matted, her face puffy from crying. She sat down, picking up the receiver with trembling hands. "Mom, thank God! You have to get me a lawyer! The public defender says they have me on tape. They're talking about 15 years. Please, Mom, I'm scared." I picked up my phone, my face a mask of stone. "Hello, inmate number 8940. She flinched. "Don't call me that. I'm your daughter." My daughter wouldn't have unplugged her husband's life support for a payout, I said calmly. My daughter wouldn't have hired arsonists to burn down my legacy. "It was Elias," she wailed, slamming her hand against the glass. "He brainwashed me." "Elias is in the cell block down the hall, and he's singing like a canary. He told the DA everything,
how you found the pills, how you forged the checks. He's taking a plea deal to testify against you." Chloe's face went white. She realized she was truly alone. "Mom, I have nothing. They seized the car. They seized my accounts. Please, put money on my books. I'm hungry." I reached into my bag and pulled out a single piece of paper. I pressed it against the glass. It wasn't a check. It was an invoice. "This is an invoice for the damage to the warehouse, for the stolen jewelry, for the car, and for the emotional distress you caused Liam. You owe the estate $300,000. You're suing me?" she whispered, horrified. "I'm ensuring that when you get out in 15 years, you won't have a penny to your name," I said, standing up. "You wanted to be independent, Chloe. You wanted to be a boss. Well, welcome to bankruptcy." "Mom, don't leave me," she screamed, scratching at the glass. "I'm sorry. I love you." I hung up the phone. I didn't look back. As the guard led her away, kicking and screaming, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I had amputated a gangrenous limb. It hurt, but it saved the body. 6 months later, the spring sun was warm on the patio. The smell of blooming jasmine filled the air, replacing the memory of antiseptic and courtroom fear. "Joyce, can you pass the lemonade?" I looked up from my book. Liam was sitting in the garden chair opposite me. He was still thin, and he used a cane to walk, but the color was back in his cheeks. His hair had grown back thick and dark. He wasn't just alive, he was living. "Here you go, son," I smiled, pouring him a glass. Son. It felt natural now. He wasn't just my son-in-law anymore. He was the only family I had left. We had sold the big house, too many bad memories in those walls. We moved into a bright, airy condo near the park. I had stepped down as CEO, handing the reins to a trusted VP so I could focus on what mattered, helping Liam heal. "You got a letter today," Liam said softly, pointing to an envelope on the table. It had the Department of Corrections stamp on it. I looked at it. Chloe wrote every week, begging, threatening, bargaining. I picked up the envelope. I didn't open it. I pulled a lighter from my pocket, the only bad habit I had picked up during this ordeal, and flicked the flame. "Joyce, you don't have to," Liam started. "Yes, I do," I said. I held the flame to the corner of the envelope. We watched in silence as the paper curled into black ash, the words inside turning to smoke before they could ever hurt us again. "She made her choice, Liam," I said, watching the ashes float away in the breeze, "and we made ours." Liam smiled, a genuine, peaceful smile. "So what's the plan for tomorrow?" "Tomorrow," I said, taking a sip of my tea, "we go to the animal shelter. You promised me we'd get a dog." "Deal," he laughed. I leaned back in my chair, closing my eyes. I had lost a daughter, yes, but I had saved a life, saved my dignity, and found a peace I never knew existed. The war was over, and for the first time in a long time, the good guys won. That is the story, my friends, a story about a mother's love that had to turn into a mother's justice, a story about how greed can turn family into strangers, and how strangers can become family. And now I have to ask you, was I too harsh? Chloe is my flesh and blood. Should a mother ever turn her back on her child, no matter what they do? Or did she cross a line that can never be uncrossed? Would you have visited her in prison? Or would you have burned that letter, just like I did? Let's talk about it in the comments. I read every single one. If this story moved you, or you just enjoyed seeing justice served, please consider supporting the channel with a super thanks. It helps me bring more stories like this to light. And don't forget to subscribe to Mama Joyce's Chronicles. See you in the next story. Stay strong and watch your back. With love.